I've spent most of my life behind the wheel of a container truck. My name's Charles, I'm 36, and I live just outside of Tacoma, Washington. Technically. The truth is, I live on the road. Rest stops, shipping yards, empty highways at dawn. That's my world. And I like it that way. It's quiet, predictable, no one asking me to be someone I'm not. But it wasn't always like that. I grew up in a house where silence wasn't peace, it was survival. My dad, John, believed respect was something you earned by being feared. He wasn't the yelling type. Not really. He was worse. The kind of man who could tear you down with a glance, a sigh, or worse, by saying nothing at all. Then there was my brother, Tyler. Golden boy. Finance degree, expensive watch, always talking about ROI like it was a personality. He was everything Dad could point to and say, "That's a real man." And then there was me, Charles, the invisible one. The one who got told, "good job," when he mowed the lawn, but only if it was straight. The one who was told, "you're trying your best," when he brought home a B with the kind of smirk that made it sound like an insult. But there was one person who made life bearable. Mom. Barbara. She was the kind of woman who said more with a look than most people could with a whole speech. She never stood up to Dad, not out loud, but she always made sure I had seconds at dinner when Tyler bragged about eating healthy. She slipped me $20 when she knew I was too proud to ask. She remembered my birthday, even when everyone else pretended they didn't forget. I used to watch her fold towels at night, quietly humming to herself like it was the only time she was allowed to take up space. That's how I remember her. Folding, humming, surviving. People like Tyler and Dad, they talk about dignity like it's something you buy, a tailored suit, a polished resume, but I found mine somewhere else, out on I-90 at sunrise when the sky turns pink and the road stretches on like it has no end. There's a dignity in work, in showing up, in doing the job no one notices until it's not done. I never made much noise growing up. I wasn't the kid with the trophies or the smart mouth. I was just there. Charles, the quiet one. Charles, the reliable one. Charles, who never needed anything, so no one ever thought to give. Funny thing about being invisible, though, you start to see everything. So when Mom's cough got worse, when she started sitting more and folding less, I noticed. When the light in her eyes dimmed but no one else said a word, I did. When Tyler sent flowers and Dad kept reading the paper, I was the one who sat with her, who heard her wheeze between words, who asked if she was okay and actually meant it. That was when everything started to change. That was when being the unnoticed son became the only role that really mattered. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Stage 4 lung cancer. It was the kind of phrase that doesn't sound real when it's aimed at someone you love. I remember the doctor's voice, polite, clinical, already shifting to management options before the word terminal could settle in the room. Mom didn't cry. She just nodded, like she already knew. I switched my driving schedule that same week, asked my boss to put me on local runs, short hauls up to Bellingham, back down to Portland, the kind of stuff that let me sleep in my own most nights, or more often, the stiff vinyl chair beside Mom's hospital bed. Tyler said he'd try to visit when he could, said his work was entering a critical quarter. He called once a week, sometimes less, always on speakerphone, voice too loud like he was pitching to a client. Dad drove her to the first couple appointments, sat in the waiting room reading the same newspaper from home, then stopped going altogether. Said the whole thing made him tired. So I stepped in, full time. I took her to chemo every Thursday. I held the little paper cup of pills while she sipped warm water through a straw. I sat beside her while the IV dripped into her arm, and she stared at the wall like it owed her an apology. I cleaned up after the nights she threw up everything she ate, and the mornings she was too dizzy to walk to the bathroom alone. And when she couldn't sleep, I read to her. Old paperbacks she used to keep on the nightstand, some romance, some mystery. She said she liked the sound of my voice, said it reminded her of the boy who used to sneak into her room at night during thunderstorms, dragging a blanket and asking, "Can I stay?" "You always did have a quiet soul," she whispered one night. "That's not weakness, Charles. That's strength no one sees." But I saw her pain, how she smiled through it when Dad visited, how she braced herself when Tyler popped in for his scheduled photo ops. He showed up with camera-ready grins and silk scarves from Nordstrom, always hugged her gently, just enough for the picture. Then he'd leave, saying he had a flight or a meeting or something I can't move. They didn't see the woman who stopped eating, who cried after they left, who whispered it's like they only come to say goodbye before I'm even gone. I saw that. Every day. And I started to get angry. Quiet at first. A slow boil, like a radiator pushing steam, then hotter. Each time I saw Dad sit in the living room watching cable news while Mom lay in bed needing water. Each time Tyler posted selfies from brunch while I was helping her to the toilet. Each time someone said, "You're such a good son," and I realized they never said that to him. One night I walked past the kitchen and heard them talking. Dad and Tyler. Their voices low, calm, rehearsed. Something about life insurance. Something about let Charles handle the day-to-day. Like I was a nurse they'd hired for free. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But something twisted in my gut. She didn't know I heard them. That was probably for the best, because I needed her to rest, to feel safe. And the only way I could give her that was to carry the weight without complaint, to become what no one else was willing to be. Her son, her caregiver, her witness. Not because it was expected, but because she was the only one who ever saw me. And I owed her the one thing no one else would give, the dignity of being cared for without condition. It happened in the parking lot outside the hospital. I had gone back to the truck to grab Mom's sweater. She always said the air in the infusion wing was too cold, even when the nurses swore it was just right. I was halfway across the lot when I heard voices, familiar ones. "Let's be honest," Tyler said, his voice casual like he was ordering lunch. "She's not going to make it to Christmas. We should be prepared." "I know," Dad replied, low and gruff. "The payout'll help at least. I already called the guy, says it'll process within 30 days. Tyler chuckled. "Well, that'll keep you in your recliner and out of debt. Let Charles deal with the mess. He's good at that." "Yeah," Dad muttered. "At least he's useful now." The blood drained from my face. They weren't talking about treatment, or grief, or how to make her more comfortable. They were talking about money, about her like she was already dead, like she was a transaction waiting to clear. And I was the cleanup crew. I didn't say a word, just stood there, hidden behind the row of cars, clutching that damn sweater like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. They didn't see me, didn't know I'd heard every word. I waited until they drove off. Then I walked back inside, sat beside Mom, and draped the sweater over her lap like nothing had happened. She smiled up at me, tired, soft, but still trying. "Always thinking ahead," she whispered. "That's my boy." That night, back in her room, something shifted. She motioned for me to close the door. Then, with shaking fingers, she reached into the drawer of her nightstand and pulled out a small object wrapped in a faded blue cloth. A cassette recorder. The old kind. The kind people used back when mixtapes meant something. She handed it to me slowly, like it weighed more than it should. "When the time comes," she said, "you play this, not before." I stared at it. "What is it?" "My truth," she said. "And yours." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Then she smiled faintly. "Evelyn knows what to do." "Evelyn?" "My lawyer," she said. "I've made changes, quiet ones." I looked at her, trying to understand. "Changes? You'll see." She closed her eyes for a moment, exhausted. "You've done more for me than they ever have. They might carry my last name, but you carry my heart." I sat beside her, gripping that little recorder like it was made of glass. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but I didn't. She needed rest. So I just said, "I'll take care of it, Mom. Whatever it is, I promise." She opened her eyes again, just long enough to whisper, "That's why I chose you." I walked out of the room that night with the recorder in one pocket and a storm in my chest. The words I'd heard in the parking lot still echoed like static in my ears. But Mom had changed something, something big, and she trusted me with it. Not Tyler, not Dad. Me, the son who drove trucks, who no one noticed, who wasn't even supposed to matter. But she had seen me. She always had. And now? Now it was my turn to see everything for what it really was. No more silence. No more pretending. They thought they were getting a payout, but Mom had left behind something else entirely. A plan, and I was the one holding it. She passed on a Thursday morning, just after sunrise. I was there, holding her hand. Her breath had been shallow for hours, her eyes barely open. I whispered to her about the old cherry tree in our backyard, how it used to bloom first in the spring. I told her the truck was running good and the weather had finally warmed up. Her hand went still. But her face, there was peace there, not relief, not fear, just peace. The hospice nurse said something soft. I don't remember the words. I just remember the silence that followed. A kind of silence you don't come back from. I stayed with her a long time. Longer than they expected, probably. I didn't cry. Not then. Dad showed up an hour later, all stiff movements and loud sighs. Tyler arrived not long after, in a crisp gray suit and shiny black shoes. The smell of his cologne filled the room like he was covering something rotten. Maybe he was. Neither of them asked how long I'd been there or how her last moments had been. Tyler clapped me on the back like we were at a tailgate. "Tough day, huh?" he said, voice low but performative. I said nothing. That afternoon, Dad started making phone calls, not to notify people, but to delegate. Arrangements, flowers, seating charts. He booked the biggest church in town, ordered roses she hated, and chose hymns she never liked. I asked to speak at the service. He laughed. "Speak?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Charles, come on. Let the people who mattered handle that." Tyler chimed in. "Yeah, no offense, but this isn't the time for blue-collar heartbreak. Let's keep it polished." It stung, but I'd heard worse. That night, I sat on my porch staring at the cassette recorder. I hadn't listened yet. I didn't want to. Not until the moment was right, and then I got the text. "Evelyn, we need to meet before the funeral. Barbara wanted me to give you something. Alone." I met her the next morning at her office, just a small suite above a dry cleaner, nothing fancy. She was older than I expected. Silver hair pulled tight, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked like she'd seen 1,000 families tear each other apart. She handed me a manila envelope. "This," she said, tapping it, "is your mother's updated will. It was finalized 3 weeks ago. You are now the sole beneficiary of her life insurance and estate. It's been notarized, registered, and legally binding." I blinked. "Wait, all of it? Even the house?" "Everything," she said. She made it very clear. She didn't want John or Tyler controlling her legacy. I sat back, stunned. "They don't know, do they?" "No," she said, "and she wanted you to be the one to tell them. In your time, in your way." She pushed a smaller envelope toward me. "She also left this," Evelyn added. "Her final letter, to be read after the funeral." I took it, hands shaking a little. "Why me?" Evelyn studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Because she knew you'd do it with heart." That Sunday, the church was packed. The kind of crowd that shows up to be seen grieving. Dad wore his best black suit. Tyler played host in the front pew, shaking hands and offering rehearsed nods of gratitude. Mom lay in the casket dressed in pale blue, peaceful even now. When I asked again to speak, Dad just laughed. "Let's not make this a circus." So I nodded, stepped back, and waited. I had something better than a speech, something stronger than a eulogy. The truth, and Mom had left it in my hands. They thought this was their stage, but they were about to learn what it meant to share the spotlight with the son they'd spent a lifetime trying to keep in the wings. The church was full. Suits, somber dresses, polite sniffles, everyone pretending like they'd known her best, like they'd earned a seat near the front. Dad took the podium first, adjusted the mic like he was stepping into a business seminar. His voice was warm, measured, and fake. "Barbara was the light of our home," he said, hand resting on the casket. "She stood by my side through every high and low, loyal, gentle, and unwavering. We were partners for 50 years. I sat 2 rows back, fists clenched. Tyler followed. His voice cracked at all the right places. "Mom taught me about strength," he said, glancing at the audience, then at a sheet of paper he wasn't really reading from. "She was my rock, and she adored Dad. Their marriage was the definition of love." My stomach twisted. They were rewriting her life right there on that altar. Every silent suffering, every compromise, every bruise they never touched but left anyway. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, voice loud enough to carry. "I'd like to say a few words." Dad looked up from the pew, blinking like I'd interrupted a performance. Tyler narrowed his eyes. "Charles," he hissed under his breath. "Not the time. It's not your place," Dad said flatly, loud enough for half the church to hear. "Sit down." I didn't. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old cassette recorder, the same one Mom had given me. I held it up for everyone to see. "She asked me to play this," I said. "At her funeral, her last request." Gasps. Some murmurs. A few turned in their seats. Dad stepped forward. "Charles, don't you dare." But it was too late. I pressed play, and her voice filled the church. calm, clear, steady. "If you're hearing this," she began, "then I'm gone, and I imagine there are flowers, a pretty speech, maybe even a few tears." A ripple moved through the room. "But I don't want memories coated in lies," she continued. "Not from people who looked the other way while I faded into the wallpaper. Not from a husband who loved control more than connection. And not from a son who only called when he needed to be seen." Tyler's face turned red. "I was never the light of this home," she said. "I was its shadow. I smiled while I was ignored. I stayed quiet while I was dismissed. For 50 years. Dead silence. "I want one person to hear this loudest, Charles, my youngest, my quiet one. You gave me dignity when no one else noticed I was losing it. You held my hand through every needle, every treatment, every night I thought I wouldn't make it to morning. I felt the tears coming, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. You never asked for praise, never expected a thank you, but you gave me love without conditions, and that's why I left everything to you." A wave of whispers broke out. Tyler shot to his feet. "What the hell is this?" "Sit down," someone muttered behind him. Dad tried to grab the recorder. I stepped back. "You can't do this," he snapped. "This isn't legal." From the side aisle, Evelyn stood up, calm, collected. "It is," she said, holding up the signed documents. "Barbara changed her will. It's been notarized, witnessed, and filed. Charles is the sole beneficiary of everything." The room tilted. Tyler looked like he'd been slapped. Dad sputtered, "You're a damn liar." But Evelyn cut in. "I'm her attorney. And if you'd like to challenge this, we can do it in court. Publicly." Someone at the back clapped. Just once. But it was enough. The whole room shifted. People looked at me differently, not as the forgotten son, but as the one who showed up, the one who stayed. I turned off the recorder, placed it gently on the podium, then I walked out of the church. Not triumphant, not victorious, just free. And behind me, I left the ruins of a story they tried to write without me. The shouting started before I even reached the parking lot. "You set this up." Tyler barked from the church steps, his suit jacket flapping behind him like he was ready for a courtroom drama no one invited him to. "You manipulated her, took advantage of her when she was weak." I kept walking, didn't turn back. "You think this makes you the hero?" he yelled. "You're just a bitter truck driver with a sob story." I heard Dad's voice next, louder, harsher. "That money belongs to this family. She was my wife. You think she had the right to cut us out?" I stopped, turned. "No," I said, steady as ever. "I think she had the right to finally be heard." Dad's face twisted, red and puffed with rage. "You don't deserve any of it. You were nothing but background noise until she got sick." "That's the difference between us," I replied. "You only saw her when she was dying. I saw her when she was alive." The church doors swung open again. Uncle Luke stepped out, my mom's older brother. He was dressed in a dark coat, tie crooked, face like stone. "I've heard enough," he said loudly, his voice carrying down the steps. "You ought to be ashamed." Tyler scoffed. "Stay out of it, Luke. You're not part of this." "I was her brother," Luke snapped, "and I watched the two of you suck the life out of her for years." People were filing out of the church now, guests, old friends, neighbors. Some looked shocked, others just tired. "She covered for you, John," Luke said, pointing straight at my father. "Always told us not to stir trouble. Said you were old-fashioned, not cruel. We believed her. That was our mistake." Dad clenched his jaw, hands balled at his sides. "This is family business." "No," Luke replied, walking down a few steps. "This is what happens when someone who's been used and ignored finally has a voice." Then he turned to me. "She told me what she did. She knew you'd be the only one strong enough to carry it through." I nodded, unable to speak. Behind Luke, murmurs rippled through the crowd. "He took care of her." "Tyler never even visited?" "John made it all about himself." Whispers at first, then clearer. People started drifting toward me, shaking my hand, nodding their respect. Not pity. Not surprise. Recognition. A woman I barely remembered from my mom's knitting circle hugged me and said, "She talked about you all the time. Said you were her blessing." Tyler stood frozen, eyes darting across the crowd as the approval he always craved slipped away like sand through his fingers. Dad muttered something under his breath and stormed off, pushing through people like they didn't matter. Tyler followed, jaw tight, fists clenched, but no one stopped them. No one cared. Their story had ended. Mine was just beginning. Evelyn approached with the will in hand. "They can't contest it," she said quietly. She covered every angle, even had 2 separate evaluations to prove she was of sound mind. "Will they try?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely," she said, almost smiling, "but they'll lose." Luke clapped me on the shoulder. "You want company for the reading?" I shook my head. "No, not today." He nodded, understood. As the crowd thinned and the whispers died down, I looked up at the sky. Gray, overcast, typical for Tacoma, but there was a clarity to it I hadn't felt in years. I didn't win anything that day. Not money, not power. What I won was something quieter. I won back her story. I gave her the ending she deserved. And in doing so, I found the beginning of mine. Not as the forgotten son, but as the one who remembered everything. That night, I turned off my phone. I knew what was coming. The outrage, the threats, the desperate spinning of a story that had just fallen apart in front of 200 people. But I didn't need to hear it. Not yet. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the cassette recorder still in my hands. I'd listen to it again, twice. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to hear her voice one more time. Just to remember that I hadn't imagined it all. The next morning, Uncle Luke called. "You should hear this," he said. Apparently, Dad and Tyler had gone into full damage control after storming out of the church. Tyler posted some long-winded social media post about betrayal and false narratives, called Mom's final wishes manipulated by a jealous sibling. Comments were mixed. Some people parroted his outrage. Others called him out, said they'd seen the way he treated Mom for years, said they weren't surprised. But the real chaos? That came later in the day when Evelyn received 2 separate voicemails from Dad and Tyler's lawyers. Bluster. Empty threats. "This will not stand. There will be consequences." She forwarded me the messages, and then she texted, "Evelyn, don't worry. Every word of that will is airtight. I reviewed it 5 times. This is noise, nothing more." She wasn't wrong. But they sure tried. By nightfall, my phone had 29 missed calls. 10 from Dad. 9 from Tyler. The rest from numbers I didn't recognize. I finally picked up when Uncle Luke called again. "You all right?" "Yeah," I said. "Better than I thought I'd be." He laughed. "Well, that makes one of us. Your dad's blowing a gasket. Apparently, they're threatening to sue Evelyn for malpractice now." "She'll eat them alive," I said. "Already has," he replied. Sent them a 6-page letter with every document they signed, every witness statement, every medical evaluation. Said if they wanted to continue, she'd be happy to go to court and bring the recorder. That shut them up. At least publicly. Privately, not so much. That same night, I got a string of texts from Tyler. "Tyler, you ungrateful piece of trash. I should have known Mom turned you against us. You're nothing but a loser with a truck and a martyr complex. Enjoy playing the victim. Won't last." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Their rage, their panic, it didn't touch me anymore. For years, I let their words shape me, quiet down when they called me soft, step back when they made decisions, swallow my worth every time they looked through me like I wasn't even there. But that ended at the funeral. Or maybe it ended the day Mom gave me that cassette. Now I had nothing to prove. They couldn't shame me, couldn't manipulate me, couldn't rewrite the past and make themselves the heroes. I went outside, sat on the porch, and stared up at the stars I'd driven under for half my life. I thought about Mom, folding towels, humming to herself, quietly surviving, and I thought about what she gave me in the end. A voice, a truth, a final undeniable piece of love. The phone buzzed again. Dad this time. I let it ring, let the silence wrap around me like armor, let it say everything I didn't need to anymore. Because I wasn't angry, I wasn't afraid, I was free. 6 months later, the house is mine. It wasn't easy. Legally, it belonged to me the moment the will was executed. But Dad tried to fight it anyway, claimed verbal agreements, hinted that Mom would have never really wanted this. Evelyn shut it down before it made it past the paperwork. So I offered to buy out his share. He refused at first, called it an insult. Then he got desperate. Tyler's money dried up quick after the funeral. Apparently, Dad had leaned hard on him for support once he realized I was done playing family treasurer. They didn't last a month under the same roof before things cracked. From what I heard, Tyler made Dad sleep in the guest room and kept the TV remote password protected. Real power move. In the end, Dad took the deal, packed up his things, said nothing as he handed over the keys, and left without even looking back. Good. I started the renovations the next week. Nothing major. just enough to undo decades of coldness. First thing to go was the heavy drapes in the living room. Sunlight pours in now, touching every inch of the hardwood floors Mom used to mop in silence. I replaced the carpet on the stairs, painted the hallway a warm amber color she would have liked, fixed the creak in the front door that Dad never got around to. And the kitchen? I gutted it. Not because it needed to be flashy, but because that was her space. She spent most of her life in there, quietly cooking for people who rarely said thank you. I put in soft blue cabinets that open shelving, a deep farmhouse sink she'd always wanted but never asked for. On one wall, I hung a photo of her from years ago, actually laughing at something I'd said while she stirred soup at the stove. It's the only photo I've got where she looks free. Sometimes I sit at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, look up at that photo, and swear I can feel her presence. Not like a ghost, more like a weight being lifted. A kind of stillness that says, you did good. I'm still driving, still working the local halls. Nothing too big, nothing too far. I like it that way. I come home to silence, but not the kind I grew up with. This silence is softer, warmer. At night, I walk through the hallways barefoot, listening to the house settle. I open her old bedroom window just a crack, like she used to. Let the wind roll in and breathe through the curtains. This house used to be a place where love got swallowed by control. Now, it's something else. A place to remember her, a place to honor her, a place to start over, quietly, firmly, fully mine.